Hi, so my name is Rachel, and I'm VP Engineering for Currency Cloud. I'm joined by Liam, who is our development manager. Today, we're going to take you through the process of how we thought about building version 2 of our API. But to start with, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to Currency Cloud. So Currency Cloud is an international payments company, and we try to make it easy for businesses to make payments across the world. We deliver our services primarily through an API. We're processing 40 currencies across 212 countries. We have 150 clients. Through them, we access 500,000 end users. And to date, we've processed $15 billion worth of payments. So this is a simplified diagram showing our application and services layer of our system. All of the heavy lifting is done by the services that make up Payment Engine 2. So these services include compliance, reporting, balances, transactions. Everything that's available through our API has a service inside of our payment engine. Now, this also includes our gateways, being our fixed gateway and our payments gateway, which we build and maintain. Through our fixed gateway, we've got access to our liquidity providers, where we can instruct our foreign exchange conversions. And through our payment gateway, we connect directly into the SWIFT network and to various banking providers to be able to execute payments easily and efficiently. We've tried to wrap up all of the complexity around making payments into one engine that's easily accessible through our API, which sits neatly as a layer on top. Now, customers can integrate with our engine through the API directly, and the majority of our customers choose to do it this way. It gives them complete control over the user journey. But we do have other customers that like to use our user interface, which is called Direct. These are customers that are perhaps developer constrained, or they're just simply looking for an easy back office tool to use as part of their operations processes. So we already had an API, and what drove our decision to have a new one? So customers were already using this API, but we found that it was so tightly coupled to those internal services that I showed before, that it was really difficult to make changes to either the services or to the API layer. We also wanted to incorporate some customer feedback, specifically around our error messages. Customers had told us they were a little bit difficult to use. We wanted our API to be really easy to use, really easy to understand, and really easy for us to maintain. Now, the second driver was also that we'd recently acquired our e-money license. This allowed us to hold customer balances, and we really wanted to put this forward into our product offering. But we would have to make this feature available through our API. No, we couldn't just go ahead and change our API. You can't just change the contract of an API once it's in place. And we felt that the best way to go about this would be to embark on making a new version of our API.
Hey, thanks, Rachel. I'm now going to spend a little bit of time going through some of the design decisions that were made when we were building API v2 before giving you a quick demo of the API in action. So hopefully what you can see on the screen now is an example of some RAML. RAML is a simple and succinct way of describing RESTful or REST-like APIs. It's essentially a text definition of the API from which you can generate documentation, client SDKs, or possibly even the API server itself. We have used it for these benefits, but we've also found it's been a really useful tool from a design aspect as well. What it's allowed us to do is take a step away from the existing system and ask ourselves what the product should look like as an API. Any differences between the outcome of that and existing current system behavior have been abstracted away in an API layer. It's really important to spend time on the design of the API because you're often stuck with the decisions you make for quite a while. As Rachel referred to a little while ago, an API is a contract between yourself and your consumers, and you can't just change it. So if you change internal system behavior, you need to ensure that the API itself remains consistent. At the same time as developing the RAML, we've also built our new front end, which we call Currency Cloud Direct. This helped us reinforce some of the API decisions that were made when we were building it, and it also helped us to prove that the API was easy to integrate with, and also that the API was scalable. Everything you can see in Currency Cloud Direct can be done through API v2, So it's a great tool to demo the power and the functionality of the API. I'm now going to concentrate on one aspect of what you can see on screen here, which is the balances that you see at the top of the screen. Currency Cloud allows you to fund multi-currency balances, and from which you can make local and international payments. And as I mentioned a little while ago, everything you can do here can be done via that API, so let's have a look at how you would do that. From the RAML that we've generated, we've been able to create some interactive documentation, which is available on our developer center. So let's continue to focus on balances. So what you can see on screen now is the documentation of how you would retrieve a balance from the Currency Cloud system. So it shows you the URL you need to hit, and it shows you the parameter that you need to supply. So it's quite a straightforward API. In this case, you just need to pass across a simple currency, and it will return you the response in the bottom. So let's actually give that a go. So let's type in US dollars, and let's execute. And what we will see is that it's returned our US dollar balance, which is 100,000 US dollars. So that matches the US dollar balance that we saw in Currency Cloud Direct. So it's effectively just a different way of accessing the API. Integrating with APIs is great when things are going well, but it can be quite frustrating when you run into problems. And we try to preempt that by documenting all of the error codes that can occur. So we have a specific error code section in Developer Center. So as I said, this is quite a simple API call because it just takes a single parameter. And the only thing we can really do wrong here is to supply an invalid currency code. So as we can see at the top, if we do that, we would expect to receive an error message back saying it's an invalid currency, and we would expect to receive an error message code, as you can see highlighted on screen here. So again, let's try that out. Let's type in an invalid currency code. Let's type in ABC and execute that call. And what we will see there is the error code coming back exactly as we've seen in the Developer Center. We've also taken it a step further than just the documentation, and we've created a whole bunch of client SDKs. So I'm going to quickly demo to you now how easy it is to integrate with us using our Ruby SDK. All of our SDKs are available on GitHub. So this is the Ruby SDK, but we currently also have them available in Java and Python, and we've got PHP and JavaScript SDKs coming soon. So it's quite straightforward to get started. You just need to install the Currency Cloud gem, which is available on rubygems.org. And then to get started, you just need to require a library, pass across your login ID and your API key, and then just tell us which environment you're using. So to get started with, you'll be hitting the demonstration environment, but once you're ready to go live, you'll change that to start using the production environment instead. So it's really easy to get started, and let's actually prove that. So what I'm going to do now is give you a quick demo of the SDK. So I'm going to fire up an interactive Ruby shell, and I'm going to require just a single file here. There's no magic going on in there. I'm just literally requiring the library and passing across the authentication details. So let's fire that up. And what we want to do is we want to just find our US dollar balance. So the class is called balance, and there's a method called get, which takes a single parameter, which is the currency that you're interested in. So in this case, I want to get our US dollar balance, so it's basically that straightforward. So what you can see has happened here. It's returned a balance object with the currency and the amount. As I showed you earlier, we also show all of the error codes in Developer Center, and we've also integrated that into the SDKs. So what happens when we type in an invalid currency code here? The system will return, and we can actually see the exact error message that's happened and kind of the advice on what we need to do to fix it. So in this case, the field that's been supplied incorrectly is a currency, and that's because it's an invalid currency code. The idea behind this is that when you're integrating with the API via the SDKs, you don't have to keep switching between your developer environment and the documentation. You can try to sort of self-solve a lot of the issues directly from your developer environment. So I hope that was a really brief demo of how simple it is to integrate with Currency Cloud's APIs via our SDK, and I'm now going to hand you back to Rachel.
So, truth be told, we didn't have all of these tools available as soon as we released version 2 of our API. We took a lot of time to engage with customers to find out which tools would be most appropriate and most helpful to them. That helped us drive understanding which of the languages would be most useful in the SDKs. We did know, however, that it would be very important for us to have a good migration guide up front, and that was available immediately. Between a good migration guide and enough support staff to help our customers migrate from version 1 to version 2 if there were any questions, those were really important things for us. So there were two things that we learned throughout this process. The first thing is use your product. We really feel that by developing direct at the same time as the API, we were able to find any logical inconsistencies in the product before our customers did, and most importantly, we could find any problems before our customers did. The second thing is just involve your customers. By speaking to them and understanding what their needs are, we really feel that our system's improved. They use your product daily and they really understand what's important to them and what fixes you might need to put into that. Your systems will definitely improve as a result, and your customers do appreciate being involved in the process.
Okay, and to wrap up, if you're keen to give the demo API a try, you just need to head over to the Developer Center, which is available at connect.currencycloud.com, and you can register for a demo API key and be up and running within a matter of minutes. Thank you for listening.
Great stuff. Thank you, guys. Now we have a few questions. You guys didn't do as good of a job sending questions, so if you do have questions right now, please send them to level2@FinDEVr.com. We'd love to address those more. I do have a few for you guys, though. First is, will there be a version 3 of the API?
Great. So there's no reason why we couldn't go up to a version 3 of the API, but we really feel that the only need to do that would be if we wanted to change what our product was offering. What we would like to do is work with semantic versioning inside of version 2 of the API. If there's any contracts that need to change, we would rather up the minor versions.
Great. The second is, do you have a dedicated API team?
So we do have a team that is dedicated as our implementation team. They do help our customers understand what's important inside of the API and how to integrate with it if they feel that any of the documentation is not sufficient. In terms of development, we don't have a dedicated API team. We prefer to make sure that all of the developers have experience across the full stack of our application. This way, the developers are exposed to absolutely everything, get a very good understanding of how the system works, and it also gives them the chance to experience all of the different items from the fixed gateway all the way up to the API layer.
Great. And how do you test the API?
Okay, so we're primarily a Ruby house. So at the API layer, we test it mainly using VCR, which is a Ruby gem. It effectively tests the contract of the API. So in VCR, you create cassettes, which basically are mock objects of the responses that you would expect to get back. And then we have a continuous integration pipeline that always tests that the response matches what we would expect to receive. That's how we test the API layer. The internal system is obviously covered by unit tests and integration tests using Cucumber as well.
Cool. One final question here is, what advice would you give to somebody developing in this area?
I'm going to assume that means the fintech area?
Yes.
So I think one advice about developing in the fintech area is that it's really important to be not only secure, but also to be completely confident that what you're doing is correct. Ultimately, you're dealing with people's money and shipping money across the world. The last thing that you want to be doing is shipping it to either the wrong destination or in the wrong amount or in the wrong currency. It's really important to be completely confident that your systems are going to do what you instruct them to do when you instruct that payment out. So I'd say that the biggest thing in developing in the fintech space is just being confident that your systems are going to do what you think they're going to do.
Okay. And I said that was the last question. We actually had a couple more roll in.
Sure.
Do you support any customization in case customers want special functionality in the API?
Well, that's a really good question. We try to make sure that the customizations are on strategy with what our product is looking to do. So if customers do come to us and have a really interesting idea that looks like this is something that we should put into our roadmap, by all means come to us with those suggestions. We do try to think quite carefully about what the strategy is. If we don't want to be integrating specific requests if it's going to take us off of what our target is.
Mm-hmm. And how do you communicate possible actions through API to UI layer?
That is a very good question.
Could you repeat that?
How do you communicate possible actions through API to UI layer?
I suppose one of the possible actions that we do communicate through to the API layer is if you think about something like beneficiaries, where anywhere in the world there are multiple different ways of sending those payments out. And you'll need to have a variety of different information between IBANs, BIC SWIFTs, address information, account numbers. And what we've done in our API is we've actually put together a reference section where you can request all of that information out that's returned with a JSON response up to the UI layer. What you can then do is interpret that to decide which fields you should be dynamically showing or not showing based on the country that you're interested in sending. If that hasn't exactly answered your question, please come chat to us at the booth because we're happy to talk about tech all afternoon. So.
Great.